Thanks for checking this out. Simon at Fine Living. Today we're going to discuss tenants in situ, or also referred to as sitting tenants. What does that mean and how does that affect property? Exactly what is a sitting tenant? Well, in the UK, a sitting tenant or a tenant in situ is someone who continues renting after the landlord decides to sell the property. But why does that matter? Well, on one hand, sometimes sitting tenants can devalue a property, meaning that some landlords looking to sell the property may have to ask that tenant to vacate earlier than intended. On the other hand, though, other landlords see the benefits of sitting tenants. In fact, the National Resident Landlords Association, NRLA as they're known, they actually argue that it's beneficial to sell with sitting tenants. Logic from NRLA is based on the UK's deficit of properties and the requirement to build 230,000 properties a year just to meet demand. So what are the rights of a sitting tenant? So a sitting tenant has a contract, a tenancy agreement in place with the landlord. The landlord has decided to sell the property. Under the new Renters' Rights Act, there is a requirement the landlord has to provide, a notice period the landlord has to provide to that tenant. They can't be evicted earlier than the required notice. What it also means is when the new landlord, so the buyer who becomes the new landlord, takes over that sitting tenant, they inherit, so they honour the existing tenancy agreement and the terms associated with it. Let's look at some of the benefits of taking on a property with a sitting tenant. For me, there are probably four that we could look at. Number one is income. There won't be a void period whilst the property is purchased because you won't have asked a tenant to vacate, therefore you won't be taking on vacant possession and you won't require an empty period once you've taken ownership whilst you find a new tenant. Number two, your marketing costs will probably be lower because you will not have to pay for an estate agent or for any marketing avenues because the tenant is already in place. Number three, you probably have a lower risk of damage. What do you mean? Well, the tenant's already in the property, so the property is already in good condition. There's no reason to think that the tenant would then start damaging the property as a result of the change of ownership. If anything, you've got a lower risk because they've shown they can look after the property already. And then finally, sort of a continuity of care. So tenants already familiar with the property have a better chance of not just looking after it, but also maintaining the property because they've built that relationship with it already. There were the positives. Let's look at the potential downsides of a sitting tenant. Well, firstly, when an agent is trying to sell a property, if it is a tenanted property, there will be a restriction on the type of buyer that can take that property on because firstly, you're looking at only investors, so you are ruling out a huge portion of the market, the pool of buyers available. Also, if you haven't decided to serve the legal notice on the tenant to ask them to vacate, and instead you're trying to sell it with the tenants in situ, there's a very good chance that they won't necessarily allow you access because legally they don't have to allow you access because of the terms of their current agreement. So managing access is another area in which could be quite challenging. Trying to wrap this up for you, I often do get asked this question, which is how long does a tenant have to be a tenant before they become a sitting tenant? And hopefully we've answered that today. It's not really as simple as that. It's more a sitting tenant is a tenant who remains in the property after the property has exchanged hands. Thank you for watching, guys.